wanted to find out what you were doing in your parishes that made you excited, and heard a lot about retreats and confirmation classes and small group activities and liturgy and prayer experiences that you were doing that really have you very excited. And when we were looking at what we wanted to do for this session, we really wanted to look at how can we take what we're doing and really step that up a level. Because we all know when we do youth ministry preparation, a lot of the stuff we were talking about with confirmation stuff are formation components. They were components that deal directly with the catechists or with the candidates. But we all know that when we're dealing with confirmation, we're not really dealing just with those candidates. And we're dealing with groups of people that interact with those candidates who are essential and fundamental to how successful our program can be and how successful that journey can be for our young people. And so looking at that, we really come up with our parents and our sponsors, two key groups that our young people deal with all the time. And so we have been asked to look at what's the role of a parent. And we all know the language. A lot of times we know the language as well as we know the language for Eucharist or faith or discipleship. We know that the parent is a primary catechist. And from the time our young people are baptized, hopefully all the way through their faith formation, we reiterate that and tell parents that they're primary catechist. They're the one who our young people learn their faith from. They model it on a daily basis. They are the ones who our young people really decide how important this is and how to engage in their faith. Our parents are domestic church. Our parents are the most local experience that our young people have of a Christian community. And we really, a lot of times, hold this up for our parents as something they need to aim for, to be a good primary catechist, to be a good example of domestic church, to really work on their role as fundamental transmitters of the faith. That if they're doing what they should be doing, everything would be great. And I must admit, if you're anything like me, and I walked in the back of the room when I got here, if you're anything like me, you've had those moments where you get frustrated, and you think to yourself, if this parent would just get out of my way, I could do my job. Okay, I heard the guilty laughter. Yeah, we do that. Or, if this parent would just realize the priorities, if this parent would just realize what we need them to do. And I think one of the things we are challenged to look at and are challenged to reconsider in our programming and the way we approach confirmation is if we really believe that our parents are the primary catechists, if we really believe that our parents are modeling domestic church for our candidates, if we really believe that our candidates are learning how to live their faith on a daily basis from their parents, what responsibility does that give us? Because a lot of times we ask parents, and I've heard from parents in the room saying, I get so frustrated. I don't want to hear how negative and how sometimes we're not doing as good as we could. And so the question becomes, what can we do as coordinators, as teachers, as catechists, as volunteers on the retreat to help our parents express, live out, and embrace the role that they already have? Because we're not giving that to them. We're not capable of giving that to them. But how do we find ways in our programs to make sure that our parents are really empowered to be solid, good primary catechists, to be that example of domestic church? Because sometimes they'll admit they don't know what they're doing. They messed up. They were told they were a primary catechist when their child was baptized, and I don't really know how to do that. I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm not quite sure how I should be doing that any more than I already am. And so our question as coordinators, as volunteers, as people who choose to be with young people as they do this journey, is what do we do to make that a reality? What do we do to help them and empower them in their role? Paul, it's all you.
Questions to ask yourselves around the table. What is one thing that you are doing in your parish to empower parents? And if there was one thing that you could change about the way parents approach confirmation, what would it be? So just for 5 minutes, talk around the tables and try to answer these questions. And then we'll tap a few people to enlighten the rest of us. Obviously, you can see this initiates a lot of dialogue. What we want to do is just take 5 minutes, and anyone who wants to speak towards, we'll answer each question in turn. So with that first question, what are some things that you're doing in your parish to empower parents? Anybody? Yes. Could I just hold on 1 second? I was sitting down over here before, actually throughout the morning, and it was really hard to hear the speakers that were talking over here. So if everyone could answer real loudly, thanks.
I think often Catholic parents find it harder to talk to their kids about faith than they do about sex. I mean, the evangelicals are boys. They'll sit down and talk to their kids for an hour and a half. So one of the things that we're hoping to start next year in our parish is to, for the kids in the religious ed program in middle school, and then hopefully move with that, is to give the parents each session. This is what we're going to be talking about next time. These are some questions. When did you get your first Bible? What's your favorite Bible story? And that's just to begin to prime them home. So that by the time they get to confirmation, there have already been some conversations on a faith thing, and we can follow up with that.
That's exactly right. If they're hearing the term primary catechist, when they come to your parent meeting at the beginning of your program for confirmation, you're going to have a hard time convincing them if they don't hear it earlier and earlier. How about some other ideas? Thank you.
I would echo that. The primary catechist thing has to start at baptism. And we can't have it disconnected between baptism and first Eucharist. We have to keep the young families connected. And whatever size the parish is, the more you do intergenerational catechesis, whether it's once a month or 4 times a year, we get dialogue going among families at tables. It really does help reinforce the fact that they are teaching their children.
Anyone else? This question? Obviously, this is a pretty talkative group, and this is a big issue that's it's hard to figure out how to make this happen. Yes, sir.
We do try to bring the parents and the sponsors in at the beginning of the confirmation process, explain to them what particularly the sponsors' responsibility is, but also what the parents is. Now, unfortunately, that's probably the end of the discussion, and whether they do anything about it or not is fairly evident during the program. But we do try to put Catholic guilt on the parents.
Catholic guilt.
That goes right next to the process.
Yes.
It just came to me too that maybe we could also, as well as asking the young people to come for formation classes, that at the same time that the parents are invited to come to a class for them as well. So Sunday evening we're going to be talking about baptism with the kids. We're talking about baptism for the parents, and at the same time they're having age-appropriate education. It means another catechist, but and faith sharing is very important. A lot of adults want to share their faith. They don't want Bible study, something that threatens them, that tells them how much they don't know. They want to talk about something that they do know, which is their struggle. And parents will certainly try and do that, I hope. But we're going to try that.
For the confirmation coordinators that are here by themselves, like their ARE is not here and their DRE is not here, you can't do this by yourself. You need to bring anyone who's working in religious ed into this dialogue, because you've got a program that you're trying to, a process, that you're trying to get through for yourself. So it's really important to bring a lot of people in with this idea, because if it's going to work, it's going to require many people. Yes, ma'am.
In our program, our sponsors attend each session with their candidate. The first year was the hardest. It's been easy as cake since then because they love it. The candidates love it and the sponsors love it. If the sponsor cannot attend, then a parent attends, generally, or they choose someone who can attend and replace the sponsor. At that time, they get some conversation starters that dealt with whatever we talked about that day. And then I just told them, you don't know this, but I send those conversation starters home, either to the parents or the absent sponsors the next day, so that they can talk with their candidate over the phone or at the kitchen table about what happened.
I was just going to ask a question of you. I know in a lot of different parishes we struggle with sponsors who live outside of the community. They're not close by. So with just what you described.
We use parents as mentors.
Parents as mentors?
Or if they have somebody else they want to ask to be a mentor.
Okay.
And email.
And email, right. Sure, yeah, we're going to get up to the technology.
Who's going to come for confirmation. They can have an email conversation probably more easily than the one who lives across the city.
Absolutely. Okay, answer the next question.
Well, I think we're actually since you started moving right on to sponsors, we're going to move on. However, one of the things that we found interesting when we were talking, and as I was circling the room, we're very adept at this point at what to do with sponsors and trying to find ways to pull sponsors into classes and trying to find ways to pull sponsors into what we're doing. And yet our parents, we don't find that as easy. We're not quite sure what to do with them. Should we require them to come to programming? Should we require them to be part of discussions and part of components? And one of the things we really look at is, what do we need to do? What do we need to ask parents to be part of so that they can really take on that role and live it actively? Not just, we bring them in and we bring them in a meeting, and I think Deacon Paul said, and maybe they do that when they get back. But with our sponsors, we seem to be much more comfortable with what the role of the sponsor is. Again, we know the language. They're the companion on the journey. They're someone who is going to walk this journey process with our candidates. They are someone who we hope, and I keep blinding myself, that we hope will be a model of lived faith. Someone that not only is just going to stand up on the day of confirmation, but throughout that process can meet with people, can have the discussions, can really talk about what does it mean to live a faith versus what it means to just kind of say we're going to claim that faith. The other part, I don't have to look at my notes, thanks. The other piece, a guide and a listener. someone who not only are they modeling that, but they're really empowering the young person to ask questions, to say, what do you do when this happens? To give guidance, to listen to the struggles, and sometimes to just be there when things are tough, when things are challenging. Doesn't mean they always have an answer. I think most of us say, don't expect to always have an answer. But someone who's at least willing to do that. Go ahead, Scott. Another point, we know that they are committed and dedicated to the confirmandi's personal spiritual growth. I feel kind of ridiculous reading these statements out because we all know this. This is stuff that when we send letters to our sponsors, when we talk with our sponsors, when we meet with them about rehearsals or about some of us have days of reflection, this is language we know. Last but not least, the sponsor is someone who is representing the church. They're in it for the long haul and they're serving on behalf of the church. They've got an identified role. And it would be really easy for us to just say, show up at confirmation. Show up at rehearsal, show up at confirmation, that's it. But the young person has picked this individual to walk and to companion